6 a.m. The pale morning light filtered through the towering glass panels of the main auditorium at Newbridge Conservatory, casting a soft golden hue onto the polished wooden floor. No music, no voices, just the faint movement of cloth and the familiar scent of wood polish mixed with beeswax. Evelyn Brooks leaned over for one last wipe of the Steinway Grand's keyboard. How many times had she polished this piano? 100, 1,000. Long enough to feel the warmth of the bass notes and the mirror-like brightness of the high ones. Long enough to know every tiny scratch, each slightly sunken key, as if the piano had its age and memory. She wasn't a musician, at least not anymore. She was the cleaner, pale gray uniform, white rubber shoes, thin gloves, smelling of bleach. An invisible figure in a school where people spoke of million-dollar sonatas and the future of global music. You missed a spot. The voice came from the main entrance. Not loud, but sharp enough to slice through the quiet like a wrong note in perfect harmony. Evelyn looked up, cloth still in hand. A young man stood there in a navy blazer, a sleek violin case slung over one shoulder, a smirk on his face as if he'd just discovered something amusing. Grant Whitford, 22, son of a major Manhattan venture capitalist and self-proclaimed prodigy of the performance department. He tapped the piano lid with a manicured finger. Right here, Grant said, a faint smudge. Can't you see it? Evelyn said nothing. She simply turned and gently wiped the already spotless area once more. Years ago, she might have responded, but now the silence was her most profound reply. Grant frowned, displeased that he didn't get the reaction he expected. He turned and strutted toward the practice wing, his footsteps echoing across the marble floor as though he owned the place. Evelyn stood upright again, her gaze returning to the piano she'd grown attached to over 11 years. A Steinway model, D, owned by the conservatory since 1983. Evelyn could recognize its sound even behind a closed door. She loved that piano, even though she had never been allowed to play it as a true artist. Evelyn. The gentle call came from the reception desk behind her. It was Mrs. Lillian Green, the elderly receptionist with half-moon glasses still working on her morning crossword. They're getting ready for the Ellington competition tonight. Best to clear out before the stars arrive. Evelyn nodded, smiling faintly. Yes, ma'am, but she didn't leave. Her eyes returned to the piano. The bench was empty. She quietly rolled her supply cart to the wall, then took slow steps forward like one approaching a church pulpit. She sat. Her hands hovered over the keys, not touching, just feeling. At that moment, she wasn't a cleaner. She was 7-year-old Evelyn in a small bar in Charlotte where her mother worked night shifts. When the bar closed, chairs stacked high, the old musician with dark skin and smiling eyes would let her touch the battered Yamaha piano. You've got something, he'd say. Something people study a lifetime for but never find in their hearts. But then her mother got sick. The music stopped. Tuition became medicine. Music gave way to survival. She had to live. Had to forget, but her fingers, they remembered. She touched a single key, middle C. The sound rang out pure and full. She closed her eyes. Just one note, but it was enough to unlock memory, enough to remind her that music never died. She just stopped believing in herself. I didn't know janitors had performance slots now. She flinched. A man stood at the door, tall, wearing a security guard uniform, his eyes kind. Marcus Taylor, 29, new to the team, young face, gentle smile, no mockery in it. He raised both hands in surrender. Sorry, didn't mean to startle you. Evelyn stood up quickly, flustered up. I was just cleaning. You touched the piano and made a sound. Marcus shrugged. Most people call that playing. Evelyn lowered her head, adjusting her uniform. I should go. You don't have to. She looked up for the first time, really seeing him. His gaze was quiet, sincere. He pointed at the piano plays, something, I'm not formally trained. Marcus looked at her hands, still curved slightly, as if playing invisible keys. Your fingers are telling a different story. She looked away, tucking her hands under her arms. I never studied properly. Doesn't mean you don't know how. Evelyn picked up her clothes, avoiding his eyes. Those pianos aren't for people like me. Marcus tilted his head. What kind of person are you? The question froze her. Her heart clenched. Her mind echoed those old voices. Who do you think you are? You're just the help. Invisible, voiceless. But Marcus's voice remained gentle. You know, the Ellington competition has a wild card slot. For an unknown tomorrow morning. 9 a.m., registration closes tonight. Evelyn laughed for the first time in days, bitterly. I'll show up in this uniform, no dress shoes, no sheet music, competing against kids trained since age 4. Marcus shrugged. Why not? I might get humiliated, laughed at Proven. That I am invisible. Ori said, eyes bright, the opposite might happen. He stepped back into the hallway, his voice trailing like a melody. It'd be a shame if the best player in this school never got heard. And then he was gone. Evelyn stood alone in the auditorium. Her hand rested lightly on the piano lid. She wasn't ready to call it hope, but something stirred within her. A quiet calling, like the piano itself, whispering to her after all these years of polishing its frame. That afternoon, Evelyn stepped off the Red Line train at Dorchester, her old cotton coat pulled tight against the wind. Her canvas tote swung with her stride. Inside were just a few cleaning cloths, a spare pair of gloves, and half a sandwich from lunch. She walked past 4 blocks in silence. The shop windows caught the fading sunlight, flecked with dust and breeze. Her red brick apartment complex was aging. Moss clung to the cracked walls like it was trying to hold on to something crumbling. She opened her mailbox the same as every day. The usual utility bills, dental ads, pizza coupons. Then her hand paused. A thick glossy flyer, the title embossed in gold. Ellington Invitational, Discovering America's Next Great Music Talent. Beneath the headline were photos of past winners, tuxedos, gowns, confident smiles, hands poised on pianos, like they were born to sit there. She flipped it over. Wildcard slot. For an unknown talent audition, 9:00 a.m. tomorrow. Main auditorium, first 20 applicants only. She froze, then quickly tucked the flyer between the gas bill and the pizza ad as if afraid someone might see her. Dreaming. Her small apartment was on the 3rd floor across from an abandoned playground. She dropped her bag beside the radiator, took off her gloves, washed her face, and sat at the old kitchen table. No lights, no TV, just silence, and that flyer now pulled out lying before her. She had no music resume, no scores, no private tutor or summers at composition camp. What did she have? A uniform that smelled like bleach-worn-down work shoes. And her fingers. They started tapping on the table in a strange rhythm, not absent-minded, a melody, a piece she once composed back when her mother was alive, when she still believed in something bigger than stacked bills. No manuscript existed. That music lived inside her, in muscle and breath, in tear-soaked nights. Evelyn shook her head, stood abruptly, and aimed for the trash. Her hand hovered over the bin flyer, almost falling. Then her eyes caught the small print at the bottom. Sometimes the extraordinary hides in plain sight. She stood still. Then, instead of letting go, she opened a drawer, gently slid the flyer inside like it was a key. No, a chance. However small. The next morning, Evelyn finished her early shift in silence. No makeup, no change of clothes. But instead of exiting the auditorium, like always, she hesitated. Her steps carried her toward the registration table, just outside the main hall. Around her, other contestants looked like they stepped out of music magazines. Tailored suits, silk scarves, glossy Italian shoes. They laughed. They talked about their summers at Juilliard. They swept past her like wind, no one noticing the cleaning uniform amid the sea of elegance. Evelyn stood behind a marble column, hiding. You came... Marcus appeared beside her, unannounced. He didn't ask why she was there. He just smiled. I didn't say I'd audition, she replied quickly. Right. You're just observing. She pointed at her uniform. I can't go in like this. I have no music, no performance shoes. Marcus reached into his coat and pulled out a filled-out form. I brought one home last night, just in case you change your mind. Evelyn stared at him, disbelieving. You heard me, yesterday. I didn't eavesdrop, I listened. It's different. He paused. I've worked security here for 5 years. I've heard all kinds of music, some great, some awful. But what do you play? That wasn't notes. That was a message. Evelyn clenched her fists. Emotion rose in her throat. It was just a short piece, but it was real. A chime rang out. A woman's voice announced, registration closes in 5 minutes. Evelyn looked at the form in her hand. Logic screamed, don't do something foolish. But then, like a familiar echo, Marcus's voice returned. What kind of person are you? Evelyn stepped out of the shadows, straight to the registration desk. The woman in charge, silver-haired, named Rebecca Sloan, immediately spotted the cleaning uniform. I'd like to audition, Evelyn said softly but steadily. Rebecca blinked, then regained her professionalism. Your name? Evelyn Brooks. Your piece? Original composition. A slight pause. We usually prioritize classical repertoire, Chopin, Beethoven, or Schumann. Evelyn didn't waver. This is all I have. Rebecca marked her down. You'll be the final name on the list. As Evelyn turned to leave, she could feel eyes tracking her. Among the waiting contestants sat a young man with slicked back hair, who looked at her like she was part of a bad joke. He muttered, "Wrong room, lady. The staff orientation is in the basement." Soft laughter rippled. Evelyn didn't respond. She sat quietly, hands clasped. One by one, names were called into the black double doors, the same doors she had cleaned 1,000 times. She had been a shadow in that room. But today, for the first time in years, she had stepped into the light. Evelyn sat among the long velvet seats, her back straight, hands neatly folded in her lap, but her chest tight like a stretched drum, every passing second a beat pounding through her ribs. She still wore her pale gray uniform. The cuffs were slightly frayed and her rubber shoes squeaked softly with each shift of weight. In a space flooded with laughter, designer perfumes, and stories of Viennese piano, teachers, her silence was glaring. She was the off-key note in a perfectly tuned orchestra. A door creaked open. A young woman stepped out from the hall, glowing with success, still holding a leather-bound sheet of music. No one had to ask how it went. Her triumphant expression said it all. Next came the voice from within. It wasn't Evelyn's name, but the list was getting shorter. Her palms were sweating not from stage fright, but from the creeping feeling that she didn't belong there. "You look nervous." That voice again, familiar, low, and warm. Marcus. He had quietly taken the seat next to her like a shade of calm under harsh sun. "How did you get in here?" she whispered, surprised. "Security perks," he winked. "Sayed." "I was checking the fire exits." Evelyn nearly chuckled. "You're almost up," he said. "I know." "You all right?" She was quiet. After a few staggered breaths, she whispered, "I don't think I belong here, Marcus." He didn't answer right away. He looked at her as if her words were ones he'd once said to himself. Then he spoke slowly. "That's a lie someone planted in your head a long time ago." Evelyn's grip tightened, his words like a needle to the softest place in her chest. The door opened again. Another contestant walked out, visibly shaken, red-eyed. No one asked. Everyone understood. The Ellington judges weren't known for mercy. Evelyn swallowed hard. The door opened once more. Preston Hale, that was the name, called next, the slick-haired guy who'd been mocking her. He rose like a Broadway performer, adjusted his collar, flashing a grin at some girls in the guest row. Before passing her, he leaned close. "Good luck with your homemade tune." Then he disappeared behind the doors. Evelyn didn't react, but the words stung like acid dripped onto her resolve. Logic screamed, "Don't do this. Don't let them laugh at you." Then suddenly, in the fragile vault of her memory, her mother's voice whispered, "Some stages weren't built for you, but when you step on them, don't ask for permission. Step like they were made for you." "Evelyn Brooks," the voice called from inside. She stood. Her legs were stiff for a moment, then moved. As she passed Marcus, he gently touched her arm. "You've already done the hardest part. The rest is just being yourself." She nodded slightly, not daring to look back. The dark wooden door opened, and she entered the room she had spent years polishing, always from behind a rag. It was larger than she remembered. Lights beamed down onto the wooden stage. 3 judges sat behind a long velvet-draped table. In the center was Dr. Loretta Sinclair. Silver hair tied up, posture, regal gaze, razor sharp. To her left sat a stone-faced man with thick glasses. To her right, a younger woman, jotting notes intently. Evelyn stepped to the center where countless others had stood. "Miss Evelyn Brooks," Loretta began, "you'll be performing your composition." "Yes, ma'am," Evelyn replied, soft but steady. "And your musical background." "Self-taught." A ripple of whispers stirred behind her. Quiet snickers. Someone muttered, "Is this a hidden camera show?" Loretta raised an eyebrow, lips tight. "And your role at this academy?" "Custodial," Evelyn answered simply. The whispers grew louder. "Perhaps." Loretta leaned back. "The Steinway is a bit too grand for a unique performance. Don't we have an old upright in the corner?" An assistant pointed to a yellowed chipped upright piano in the corner. "It hasn't been tuned." Perfect. Loretta smiled, cold as ice. Easier on the ears for something experimental. Evelyn looked at the piano, then walked toward it. Each step tested her pride. She sat down, placed her hands on the worn keys. No need to look, no need to wait. She simply said, calm and firm, "This piano will do." And then, she began, a sound rang out small at first. Then a melody began to form. No one realized it at that moment, but the history of the Ellington competition had just shifted. The first note breathed into the space, tentative, delicate, as if it might vanish beneath the weight of silence. But it didn't. It expanded note by note, reaching beyond technique, beyond perfection, into something deeper, something raw, something alive. The old upright piano protested at first. Misaligned keys, stiff pedals, low notes that rumbled unevenly. But Evelyn didn't falter. She understood the way old things groaned like wood floors creaking on winter mornings, like rusty hinges sighing at every gust of wind. And like her, the piano didn't need to be flawless to speak. A deep rhythm from her left hand anchored the piece, slow, steady, unwavering like her nightly walks through the conservatory's empty halls. Her right hand spun a melody fragile as a whispered prayer beside a hospital bed, where she once sat through long, frozen nights beside her mother. The piece had no title. It had never been written down, but it was her. It was her 12-year-old self, playing in a tiny chapel, wearing a borrowed coat from the church pantry. It was the sound of cleaning windows in the rain, humming melodies to survive the monotony. It was the voice that once said, "I used to dream, but dreams don't pay rent." At the judge's table, Dr. Loretta Sinclair's polite smile started to fade, her eyes flickering no longer cold. "What is this?" the assistant judge whispered pen, frozen midair, hovering above a blank page. In the back row, Preston Hale sat bolt upright, confusion on his face. The contestants no longer chuckled, they were listening. The longer Evelyn played, the more she forgot where she was. This wasn't a competition, it was a memory. It was true. Each key was a chapter of her life she'd once buried beneath duty. And the piano. No longer a dusty relic. It was a partner, an old friend, a soul awakened. A sudden jazz phrase emerged, light unexpected like sunlight through the barred window of her old apartment. Then gospel tones reverent and aching, interweaving hope and sorrow. A symphony born not from education but experience. Then, a soft shuffling, a clap. From the last row, then another. And then like rain breaking through silence, a wave of applause. Not polite, not pity. Recognition. A young man quietly removed his headphones. A girl stopped writing and placed her hand over her heart. Evelyn ended on a low chord, held it, then released. Silence. Not the kind that stings, the kind that reverberates. As if everyone in that room, even the ones who had scoffed, had just witnessed something beyond music. Dr. Sinclair folded her hands on the table. Her previously sharp face now softened in awe. The other two judges didn't write a thing. Their eyes remained fixed on the woman who had risen from a cleaning crew and now stood tall beside a forgotten piano. Evelyn did not bow, did not speak. She simply stood serene. For the first time, she didn't need permission to belong on that stage. The air in the audition room didn't return to normal. It hovered between the ordinary and something more, as if everyone was waiting for someone to name what had just happened. Dr. Loretta Sinclair straightened, trying to regain her poise, but her gaze never left Evelyn now, standing by the piano hand, slightly trembling, but spine unwavering. Evelyn said nothing. She didn't need to. A soft cough broke the trance. The papers rustled as if the world needed to resume itself. But nothing could erase what Evelyn had just left behind. A nameless, unwritten composition, yet everyone had heard it. Meredith, the competition coordinator, stepped backstage, her gaze different now. No longer the quiet condescension of someone watching a worker risk embarrassment. Now it was caution, respect, even fear. She spoke, voice carefully neutral. "Thank you, Miss Evelyn Brooks. The judges will deliberate and announce results during the awards ceremony this evening." Evelyn gave a small nod, then stepped off stage. She didn't look around, didn't seek validation. Her steps were steady, unhurried, as if even the wooden floor wanted to memorize the rhythm. Each step passed those who had once laughed, once dismissed her. Now they looked away. At the back of the hall, standing in the soft glow of the exit, was Jordan. Not in his usual security uniform. Today he wore a simple black shirt and a coat folded over one arm. As Evelyn approached, he smiled, saying nothing. He handed her a small towel and a bottle of water. "I guess no one's asking you to clean smudges anymore," Jordan said, half joking. Evelyn laughed a real laugh. Not because she had won, but because she had finally been seen. Evelyn sat on the bench just outside the main hall, her hands wrapped around the unopened bottle of water. The hallway buzzed faintly with movement, but around her, everything felt hushed, like the quiet after a storm where the air still vibrates from thunder, long gone. "I didn't think I could do it," she whispered, her eyes still drawn toward the glow of the stage. Jordan sat beside her, resting his elbows on his knees. "But you did," he said softly. "And not just barely, you did it in a way no one will forget." She turned to him, eyes wide. "You were inside. You watched." He nodded, smiling gently. "I've always been inside. I just used to stand behind the curtain." Moments later, Meredith walked briskly toward them, clutching a file in both hands. Her posture was stiff, her expression unreadable. "Miss Brooks," she said, voice measured. The judges were very impressed. Evelyn didn't answer. She waited. Meredith cleared her throat. "I may owe you an apology for what she faltered. The rest of the sentence never came, because in Evelyn's steady gaze, forgiveness had already passed. It didn't need words. Later that evening, Evelyn and Jordan walked slowly toward the academy's main entrance. Before stepping outside, she turned back. The auditorium door was still open. Inside, the old upright piano sat untouched. No one dared play it after her, because now they all knew that piano had made history, and Evelyn Brooks was no longer invisible. 3 days passed, and on the third morning, Evelyn woke before dawn. No dreams, just a full, quiet feeling inside her chest, like the echo of applause still bouncing off the walls of her ribcage. She brewed herself a cup of strong black tea, then opened the ancient email account she had used only for bill notices and store coupons. But today, 213 new messages. The first subject line read, "A star from the shadows. Viral video of janitor's piano. Performance moves millions." Her breath caught. No one had told her the audition had been filmed. No one asked for permission, but someone had recorded it, and the world had seen it. BBC World, NPR, The Guardian. A TikTok account with 12 million followers captioned the video. She didn't play a piano. She opened a door for every silent voice out there. An email from a conservatory in London read, "We would be honored to have Ms. Evelyn Brooks speak on the power of music beyond class or training." Another from a record producer in New York. "That composition raw, untamed, refined only by life itself. We'd love to discuss recording it." But among all the praise and opportunities, one message made her freeze. "My daughter is 9. She quit piano because she thought music schools were only for rich kids. After seeing you play, she said, 'Mom, I think I want to try again.' Thank you, from a mother who cried for a long time last night." Evelyn read it 3 times. Then she opened the kitchen drawer and pulled out an old notepad once used to list cleaning supplies. This time she wrote a single sentence. "Music isn't just meant to be heard. It's a message for anyone who's ever believed they weren't allowed to dream." She pinned it to the wall right beside her mother's photograph. That afternoon, the phone rang. It was Dr. Loretta Sinclair. Her voice was formal, poised, but there was something else too. A softness is not present before. "Evelyn, we've come to a decision." Evelyn held her breath. "We evaluated technique, style, and artistic presence, and," pause, "we could not overlook what happened in that hall. You reminded everyone why music exists to move, not just impress." Then came the words Evelyn had never imagined hearing. "Evelyn Brooks, congratulations. You are this year's Whitmore Invitational Champion." Evelyn wasn't sure what she said next. Maybe it was thank you. Maybe she just cried. But once she hung up, she walked to the second-hand piano in her living room. It still had 3 broken keys. The pedals squealed. The lid had to be propped up with an old paperback. She sat down, didn't play. She just rested her hands on the keys. Then one tear fell, not from sadness, but because for the first time in her life, she had been celebrated for being herself. The news spread like wildfire. Within 1 week, Evelyn Brooks transformed from a woman scrubbing floors to an icon of hope in music circles around the world. The janitor who sat at a broken piano and made the world listen. On a quiet Monday morning, Evelyn returned to the conservatory not as the early shift custodian, but for the last time in that role. But something was different. She scanned the bulletin board by the staff entrance. Her name was no longer on the cleaning roster. Instead, affixed to the front doors of the main auditorium was a polished brass plaque, "Elegant Permanent." Evelyn Brooks, winner of the 42nd Whitmore Invitational Artist in Residence. She stood frozen. Jordan, in his usual security uniform, stood nearby, watching her reaction with a soft smile. "Not many names get carved into this building," he said quietly. Evelyn stepped forward and touched the plaque. It was cold, but in it she felt warmth, recognition, and for the first time in over a decade, she wasn't just a shadow in the hallways. She was someone who mattered. That afternoon, the conservatory held a press conference. Evelyn entered in a simple black dress, no expensive jewelry, no entourage, just a silver hair clip, the only thing her mother ever left behind. Flashes burst from every corner of the hall. One reporter called out, "Ms. Brooks, what helped you step past all the barriers and perform that day?" Evelyn looked up. Her voice was calm, resolute. "I wasn't trying to break through anything. I just sat down and told my story through music." She paused, then smiled softly, and for the first time, someone listened. She was later invited to speak at a national arts symposium. Evelyn didn't talk about her victory. She spoke of the little girl who once borrowed a piano at church, who learned by memory, and who thought her dreams had an expiration date. And she ended with a single line that left the room breathless. If an old forgotten instrument can be cleaned and played again, then maybe, just maybe, people can too. 1 week later, Evelyn received a handwritten letter from a child in Iowa. Inside was a crude sheet of music and a note. "I wrote this for you. It's called The Janitor Who Could Sing." Evelyn wept reading it, because she knew. This was no longer her story alone. It had become a mirror for everyone who was ever overlooked, dismissed, or told they were not enough. That night, she returned to her tiny apartment, the one she had lived in for 11 years, in silence. She sat at her old second-hand piano, not to rehearse, not to impress, just to play something no one else would hear, for herself. She let her fingers find a new melody, gentle, honest, and more complete than anything she had ever composed before. Her first week as artist in residence began without ceremony. She walked into the lecture room without a single page of formal curriculum, only a blank music pad and an open heart. 12 students waited. Some of them had once watched her mop their practice rooms. Now they waited for her to speak, but she didn't stand behind a podium. She sat at the old upright in the corner. "I don't have a teaching degree," she said, voice steady. "I can't explain. Rhythm with charts or equations." She paused, looking at each student. "But I know what it feels like to carry a note inside your chest and not be able to sleep until you set it free." She played a small phrase, delicate and aching. "I'm not here to teach you how to play, right? I'm here to show you how to play so that someone never forgets you." Word spread. Her class grew from 12 to 20, then 40. Soon even classical majors and composition students began auditing her sessions. She didn't teach theory, she told stories. About listening to music echo through the stage at midnight while mopping. About the first time she dared press a single key when no one was around. About one truth she believed. Music doesn't choose the most skilled. It chooses the most honest. One afternoon during a break between lessons, a composed woman in a sleek suit entered the room. Elaine Dawson from the New York Philharmonic. "Ms. Brooks," she said, extending a folder, "we'd be honored to have you open our season with a performance." Evelyn blinked. "Why me?" Elaine smiled. "Because after years of perfect lifeless renditions, people are remembering what it feels like to cry over a melody without a name." Evelyn nodded slowly. She didn't answer yet. Instead, she turned to her students and resumed their conversation, because right now, they mattered more. That night, she walked past the very wall she used to lean on during breaks between mopping, a wall she once thought she'd never get beyond. Now she was on the other side. Not because someone invited her, but because she stepped forward when no one thought she belonged. At Brown University, she was invited to give a keynote. Her final words brought the audience to silence. "I didn't learn music in school. I learned it from life. And if anyone out there still thinks they're not enough, just remember, sometimes the most beautiful notes come from the instruments we've forgotten to listen to." As she stepped off stage, a student ran after her, handing her a wrinkled composition. "It's for my mom," he whispered. "I've never played it for anyone, but if you read it, maybe I'll dare to play it someday." Evelyn smiled. "Don't play it for someone else. Play it for the first person who should believe in you." That fall, the Lincoln Center glittered beneath 1,000 lights. On stage, Evelyn walked alone toward a Steinway concert grand, the same kind of piano she had once only been allowed to clean. She wore a black gown, simple, no jewelry, no press agent. Just a single silver hair clip. The crowd, 200 strong, fell silent. No flashy intro, no dramatic voiceover. Just a program line that read, Evelyn Brooks, original composition is untitled. She sat, placed her hands on the keys. For a moment they trembled not from fear, but from the truth. She remembered the toilets, the rags, the broken piano at home, her mother's voice. Don't believe dreams are only for the rich. Then she played. A low melody whispered, not impressive, not flashy, but honest. The first layer was darkness, the years of silence and invisibility. Then came the breaking point, a cry from deep within. And then, freedom, a riff of jazz unexpected and thrilling. She was improvising on the biggest stage in America. Not one person breathed, and when the piece ended, silence remained. Then, thunder, a standing ovation, claps, tears hands over hearts. Not because she'd performed perfectly, but because she'd reminded them, music isn't theory, it's courage. She didn't bow. She didn't speak. She walked off stage. And behind the curtain, Jordan stood waiting, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He smiled. I'm not saying you did it anymore. She turned to him, eyes wet. Why not? He replied, because you don't need anyone's permission. Now you stepped up without waiting. The next morning, 3 front pages shared the same headline. Evelyn Brooks, America's answer to what music is really about. And in a radio interview that week, a listener called in to ask, Ms. Brooks, what advice do you have for those who feel invisible because of where they come from? Evelyn paused, then answered, they might not invite you on stage, but you can always step up and bring your piano with you.